Since the dawn of time, man has been curious. And for almost as long, the Vibes Broadcast Network has sought the truth. Investigate, discuss, explore. Okay, maybe in other episodes, but this one is just listen to the vibes.
The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I have here Mr. Jerry Zehr, and he is an author. He is a speaker and also a spiritual guide. And we're going to have a nice conversation. And until then, let's have him introduce himself and tell us a little bit about you, sir.
Well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me on your podcast here and with your listeners. I grew up in northern Indiana. I actually grew up in a very kind of conservative Amish Mennonite background.
Oh, wow.
And was very legalistic, kind of don't dance, don't drink, don't smoke, you're going to go to hell. I always felt like I was going to go to hell for something, right? But I never bought into it because I had friends who were Baptist, Catholic, and I even had some friends, who were Jewish at that point, and they were good folks. So I left the church, I left God, and I went into the entertainment business. My degree was in speech and theater. I went out to LA, and I was performing in comedy clubs and performing on the Johnny Carson show and different things. But I really found my life was pretty empty inside. The question always was, what are you willing to sell your soul for? I was always having to find out what I was compromising. So anyhow, I found myself leaving theater and beginning my own spiritual exploration. And that's what turned me into becoming, I was teaching speech and theater, and then I went to seminary to kind of put my faith together. And then I've ended up being involved as a minister for 36 years and involved with Interfaith Ministries for those years.
Now, can you kind of explain what interfaith is?
Well, for me, interfaith or multi-faith is building relationships with people of other faith traditions.
Okay.
So even though I come as a Christian, I think there's so much division in our world right now. And
Sure.
Many people have never met a Muslim or met a Jew or met somebody of a faith. And so when I wrote this book, The Peacemakers Path, Multi-Faith Reflections to Deepen Your Spirituality, the purpose was to help people come to some understanding that we have much more in common than what divides us.
Right. Well, I've noticed in the media, things like that, they want to portray the extremists in religion, the ones that kind of go overboard, like in the Muslim faith. They only want to tell you about the terrorists. And I know Muslims that they're nothing like that. They're very loving, very giving, not much different than me as a Baptist, as far as, as spirituality goes.
That's right. And it's interesting because, in the Crusades, Christians used the teachings of Jesus to kill a lot of people.
Right.
And even today, there are those who say they're Christian, but they do harm. The same way for Muslims, the ISIS, who were the terrorists. Well, the reality is ISIS killed more Muslims than they did even Christians. But because of the media, the way it represented, and if you never met a Muslim, you thought all Muslims were terrorists.
Exactly.
Well, once you studied the Quran, the core teachings of the Quran about loving your neighbor, forgiveness, caring for the poor, compassionate, are there. But as you said, if you haven't ever met somebody who's a Muslim, you just think what the media has said, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I wrote this book, because the idea was I took 6 themes that are in all of the major religions. And the 6 themes that Jesus speaks about, that Buddha spoke about, Baha'u'llah, the Quran, and it's not a book of theology. It's a very easy, accessible 40-day devotional. So you can take one day and I'll have that theme. You'll read the reflection that I wrote. Then you have the scriptures from all of the world religions, and then you have a prayer from a faith tradition. And the idea was, wow, I didn't realize that Buddhist teachings were some of the same teachings of Jesus. Now, clearly we have some things that are different. I realize that. We're not all, I'm not saying we're all the same, but I want to suggest we have much more in common than what divide us.
Well, once again, in the media and social media and film, television, these things do everything they can to suppress spirituality, demonize it. All you really hear about when they talk about Catholics is, how you've got these priests and others that molest children, or you've got the extreme Baptists that go and they protest at funerals and all these other things, and anything they can to make you not like religion, when in fact, if they took the time, they'd realize how most of us are not that way. We are loving people. We're accepting of everyone. You're supposed to love your neighbor, love the sinner, but you hate the sin. Now they can't understand why we can separate that from a person. We're all sinners.
Well, and Jesus' teachings were so much about loving your neighbor, not judging. He went to the Samaritan woman who was of a different faith. He talked to a woman in those days that was taboo in itself.
Right.
And she come to the well. She'd been married 5 times, so he didn't judge her or shame her or say, "Oh, you're a whore and you're blah blah blah." And she came from a different faith as a Samaritan than the Jews were. But what did he do? He talked to her, he respected her, valued her, and then he said, "You worship the God you do not know. We worship the God we know. But one day we will worship in spirit and truth." And I think that's so important to realize that God is much bigger than what I have a God in my box, right? God is much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of what I've changed a lot in my understanding than what I grew up as a young person.
Well, Jesus made a point that, he would go and he would turn the tables over at the synagogues, what have you, and basically they're trying to profit from the church instead of giving the teachings they're supposed to. And he didn't spend his time with all the people that were religious. He spent the time down with the people who didn't know God to spread that word. I feel like some people have forgotten that. They want to get in their little clique, their little groups in church, and they don't want to have anything to do with people outside of the church. And that defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've played poker my whole life. I play in the World Series of Poker. My father and I played poker. So when I'm at the poker table out in Las Vegas playing in tournaments, they don't know I'm a minister. I don't make that point. And I just, but I hear these stories, and a lot of them, okay, maybe they got turned off from church because it was very judgmental, or they don't feel they're worthy. Okay, so maybe they live a rough life or they do different things. But then when they find out I'm a minister, all of a sudden they feel, they change their expecting it because they think I'm going to judge them. And then when they find out, oh, you play poker, and they're like, oh, cool, and then when I'm about loving and caring for them, they go, man, that's a whole different idea of what I think of as ministers are,
Mm-hmm.
and it's good.
I used to preach myself, and I spent 5 years at a Baptist church, and the preacher that I had, I still love him to this day, but he wanted us to live up to something that we knew we're never going to live up to. And the moment that you made a mistake, well, then they were quick to shun you instead of, embracing you and say, hey, this is where you made a mistake. You don't stop loving your kids just because they do something wrong. You discipline them, but then you still show love to them. Well, it got to be, I don't want to get into details about it. I don't want to call anything out on this. It's just say that it ended up, I got really turned off. I left the church and then realized I was focusing in on the religion and not the spirituality of it.
Right.
So
I think you're right. And I did too. You know, I had that same experience. And so, but what I say to people, don't give up on God because of humanity's sin or our religion, right? People can use religion in a good way or a bad way. And even the teachings of Jesus, he had no intentions of creating a whole religion of Christianity. He wanted to reform Judaism. He wanted to help people come to a closer understanding of God on earth, not so much about heaven. You know, he said, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. He said, the kingdom of God is at hand. It's within your midst. And so it was about us finding that joy. Why did Jesus say over and over again about not judging? Why was it he said, you know, how you treat the least of these, you treat me? Because it is about our love and compassion, and forgiveness is how we are to live our lives out.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And of course, he said we're in this world, but we're not of this world.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there's a reality that that's part of our own spiritual growth is how do I live my life with integrity, keeping a connection for myself, but not being influenced by the social media or by, you know, consumer mentality. It's over and over. It tells us that we're not good enough, you know, that you have to do this and do that. And then we have our own kind of closed-mindedness and our own beliefs. And so how do we open ourselves up to other points of view and other people? And, you know, we said before that the typecast, you know, when you think of somebody from Texas and you have your accent, I have a stereotype exactly who you're going to be. And then you find out, man, this guy is like open-minded. This guy is wild. Or you know, you see this guy's a minister and you have a certain understanding. And like we said before, somebody who's Muslim or somebody who's agnostic. You know, I have friends who are agnostic and they get beat up a lot of times by religious people. And I feel bad for them because all an agnostic is somebody who says, I'm not sure what's out there. I'm seeking. And so in some way I say to him, I'm agnostic too. And they go, what? Well, I don't know what's out there. I mean, nobody's been there and, you know, proven that. So it's a set of beliefs, but I respect you. I value you as a person, even though you have a different point of view.
Yeah, true. And you made a good point that the consumerism. I'm going to bring up something. You know, the people will go out and they will spend a couple $100 on a pair of tennis shoes, pair of jeans, a shirt, that kind of thing. And okay, you've spent all that money, and then a couple of years later, it's out of fashion. So you get made fun of because you still wear those things. Look how much money they spent on that just to be made fun of later. Or you have a cell phone. My cell phone's a couple of years old. I tried to take good care of it, make it last as long as I can. And people will say, what kind of phone you got? And I tell them what kind of phone I have. Wow, that's out of date, man. You're so behind time. I just spent $1,000 on this stupid thing, and I'm taking care of it. It still works. It's still good. Why do you have to keep up with the Joneses? That's the problem with this world, is trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to fit in with what everybody else wants. You see it in Hollywood. Nobody wants to give their own opinion in Hollywood because they want to fit in with, you know, whatever the narrative is going around Hollywood. Everybody wants to fit in. Nobody wants to be their own self. They tell you to be an individual, but they don't really want you to be an individual.
Well, and I think you're right. And that's why the spiritual truth that Jesus spoke of, that people who grew up as a Hindu or listened to people who are Buddhist, what I have found is the spiritual truth is truth. God has revealed that at different times in different places. The Native Americans have a rich spirituality They are not godless people. In fact, when you study the Native Americans, their spirituality, they speak about God as, the spirit, the higher and the great spirit beyond. Some people speak about God as Allah or as a higher power. I have a lot of alcoholic friends who are in Alcoholic Anonymous, and they're not especially religious, but they understand there's a higher power. There's something beyond us that we need to connect with. And so the whole reason I wrote this book was to say, here you can read and you can learn a little bit about other faith traditions and other people. And then you find out the principles about patience or about loving yourself, about not, about trusting yourself, about these different principles that are, I talk about the keys of life, the universal laws. Like, let's say, Jesus said, you reap what you sow. I love this image. What you put out there, what you will reap what you sow. What you sow, you will come back to you. And so that principle is karma in the Buddhist and the Hindu tradition. Now, karma is kind of a word everybody throws around, but that's been an ancient teaching that is a universal truth. And I found it in my own life. If I put out there greed and anger, or I put out bitterness, it comes back to me. I mean, I will have drama in my life and negativity. If I put out joy and compassion, forgiveness, and that comes out 100-fold. And so, some people have a lot of drama in their life. And I think we can we can make heaven on earth, or we can make hell on earth.
Can I ask you a question without sounding facetious?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say on one part of the world, you pick up a flower, you call it a flower. On the other side of the world, somebody picks up a flower, but they call it a book. Another part, they call it a car. Another, they call it a lamp. Now, to us, it's a flower. To other people, it's a different word. Is it still the same thing, like in that analogy when you're talking about God?
That's an interesting point, isn't it? That's a good philosophical question, because our understanding of God is different. Our understanding of God is different in different places, different ways. And so I change in my view of God. Like, I used to think of God as this being out there somewhere in the universe going to strike me down, and like Santa Claus, I pray to it. And if I get my answers and that, well, now I've realized, as I've read more, as I experience more, even in science, quantum physics speaks about energy, the consciousness of the universe, vibrational level of the universe, that in fact, I see God as spirit, right? God is present in all things. It used to be, I thought of God as separate from us, but now, so I have a new understanding. So that's an interesting question. If I see God as one image, it might be different for somebody else. But that's why I love having the conversation, because it might help me have a new understanding of that. How do you answer that question?
Well, to me, of course, there are certain religions that it's obvious that we're talking about two separate things. But for the most part, like my Muslim friend, I think we're just, even though he calls God Allah and I call him God, I think we're talking about the same thing. Of course,
and actually, let me just push a little against to say, all religions, in all of the major religions, they see a supreme understanding or a consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
In the Hindus, I used to be taught Hindus were godless people. They worshiped monkeys and trees, and they worship them. Well, in reality, they don't worship them as a god. They worship them as a manifestation of God.
Okay.
Just like in the Catholic tradition, they might pray to Mary. They don't see Mary as God, but it's the vessel that they see. So for Hindus, they would say, this nature is an expression of God, but they do believe in a Brahman, an ultimate kind of a higher universal consciousness. So in that way, yes, I believe all of our religions have an understanding of God. We use different words, but they see a universal higher power or that type of thing.
Okay. Now, you can disagree with me on this, and I'd understand. But number one, I got away from religion. I felt more like it was rules that man was making up, and I got more into the spiritual part of worship. As for me, I think of God as basically being the universe itself, and that higher vibration. You're trying to get to a higher vibration, and that manifests itself in, say, daily affirmations. I always say too, if you're thankful, gratitude will change your attitude. So I'm trying to reach that vibration. And you could tell when your vibrations are low, then it seems like you attract negativity. When your vibrations are higher, then you're attracting positivity. To me, that's what God is.
I agree 100%. And I realize I have friends who are Catholic, and I have friends who see God in a different way than me, and I value them. And I say, you're a child of God, and I will respect and value them. Now, personally, I'm much more in line with you. I have come to understand that the essence of God is within us and in all living things. And so, it's interesting. I had a dog, and on my way home, my wife would say the dog would be out at the front door ready. I'd be like 2 miles away. My dog had a sense of my connection with animals. I have people who have such a connection with animals more than I do. Dr. Bruce Lipton has written a book called The Biology of Belief. And he talks about the sense of our thoughts and our energy that manifests in our body and also manifests in the world. So I really do believe that we have that connection with all of living beings.
Now, here's something else I want to ask you, and this is my belief as well. Meditation and prayer as being the same thing. Do you believe that?
Yes, I do too. People talk about yoga like sometimes it's bad. Yoga or meditation is breathing. In fact, Paul says, pray ceaselessly. Ceaselessly is almost like breathing. So prayer gets me connected. Now, there's sometimes to have an intentional prayer. Maybe I'm going to take some time to quiet my mind. And meditation for me is breathing and time to focus. And there's certain different aspects of breathing that people do or different aspects of meditation people do. But I want to affirm all expressions of different cultures and faith. People trying to connect with God are helpful to them. But I'm like you. I believe meditation is very much a form of prayer. And what is prayer? The question is, what is prayer? Prayer is my connecting to God. And I always say to people, it's not to change God's mind, it's to change me.
True. Well, I think people kind of correlate prayer as the time that you ask for things. I don't necessarily think you have to be asking for something. You could just be praising God and thanking him for everything that he's already done for you. Every once in a while, I will ask him to change other people's way of thinking or feeling, but for the most part, I want him to help me change, get better, because I know that's where it all starts, is within me, which is why I started this.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think there's value of people praying for peace, praying for unity, healing, that it can manifest. Part of all this is our thoughts get manifested. And so the more people who focus on positive thoughts of love and joy get manifested in the world, there's a ripple effect. Clearly has. What we put out there comes forth. And so I do think that prayer can affect, maybe it can't, change it like we think it is. And the problem is sometimes people want to pray for something, and if they don't see the results the way they want them, then they give up on prayer. But clearly we're knowing quantum physics is showing us there are different dimensions in the universe. Quantum physics understand energy cannot be destroyed.
Exactly.
It gets manifested. So science is catching up with what we understand as spiritual beings.
Right. Well, and I've tried to explain that to folks because, I am a paranormal investigator, and people say, oh, well, there's no such thing as ghosts, that kind of thing. And I'm like, you do realize that we are made up of energy, and you cannot destroy energy. If you can transfer it. So that's what I think when you see a ghost, it's energy from somebody. I know a lot of people frown on what I do, and that's fine. Agree to disagree.
Right.
But that's how I explain it.
And and ultimately, when I say to people, they, whatever your beliefs, what does it manifest? If it manifests hatred or separation or hurtfulness or division, or does it manifest love and joy and beauty?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I come to, that Jesus wanted us to have abundant life here on earth. And his thing was about, being in touch with the divine and living, letting go. I mean, so many of us grew up with shame and guilt, and we have things in our past that we regret, that God wants us to forgive ourselves and to be set free from those things. And those are some of the things I write about. How do we find inner peace? Because a lot of us have carried a lot of negative stuff that we still carry on in our life.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. I've found that I'm quicker to forgive other people than I am to forgive myself. I still beat myself up over things that happened 20, 30 years ago. How do we go about actually forgiving ourselves? I mean, you can say the words, but how do you actually do it? Because I've said many a times, okay, I've made a mistake, it's time to move on. But then I come back and I beat myself up for it again.
Right. Well, and part of that is we let those things stay in our brain. The things of our past, we say, I'm going to let them go. I'm going to let them go. But then the thoughts come into our brain and we dwell on them. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is I have learned, and it's been significant for me, because I had to learn how to retrain my thoughts to say, just because I grew up, okay, in a situation, my father gave me a lot of things, but he was very driven himself. And I was always thought I was lazy. And he always said I was lazy. And then I realized I'm not lazy. That was just something that was ingrained in me. And so I'd start, I'd hear those things. Oh, you're no good. You can't measure. And I go, wait, I don't even believe that any longer. Or when somebody would give me a compliment, I'd go, oh, that's fine. Thank you. But I really didn't do very well. And now when somebody gives me a compliment, I just take it in. Thank you. That's good. The same way the things I did in my past, I look back and now I start to say to myself, and this is about almost a self-coaching, self-teaching. I say it's embracing what Jesus really wants us to know. You did the best you could. You messed up. Now you see it. But at that time, it's not like, somebody gets divorced. You didn't intentionally get married to get divorced.
Right.
You didn't intentionally do drugs thinking you were going to get, you were going to destroy yourself. You did drugs to mask the pain. Exactly. You did drugs because you thought it would give you something that it didn't. And so some of it is forgiveness is giving ourselves a little bit of grace, giving ourselves a little bit of not beating up on ourselves.
It's very difficult. You know what I mean? And I will say, you did bring up a good point. And my preacher, I took a lot of of his words, and they still resonate with me today. One thing he always taught me is don't steal other people's blessings, which meant, if somebody wants to give you a compliment, or if somebody wants to give you something in general, that adds to their rewards in the afterlife. So when they are trying to do something nice for you, just say thank you, accept it. A lot of us are quick to, and this is the way I was raised. If somebody offers you something, oh, no, thank you. You don't want to take something. I guess they think it's kind to say no. I don't want that, instead of, you know what, thank you. And that makes them feel good.
Well, I think we're ingrained a lot of things early on in our childhood that are ingrained in us that we have to realize, who said, when you start to think about yourself and you think, oh, I'm not any good at this. Oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. Where did that come from? Somebody told you you weren't any good at it, or somebody said, you're cocky, you're a belligerent person, when maybe you're opinionated. And now I think we can always take suggestions. People have opinions and they give us feedback, but then I have to say, okay, so I might listen to that, but now I can analyze it. When I was a young person, I didn't have enough confidence. I just believed it. If somebody told me that I was stupid, I just believed I was stupid. Now, if somebody says I'm stupid, I go, no, I'm not. Just because you tell me I'm stupid, that doesn't make me stupid. And I think that's so important, that we have to think about, when we're talking about forgiving ourselves, the things of our past, we have to realize we did the best we could. We have to give some compassion to ourselves as well as to others. And we are harder on ourselves. We are.
Mm-hmm.
And once we acknowledge that, once we say, wow, why am I harder on myself than others? Maybe because that's the way I was brought up. And why is it hard to forgive? Because we think we deserve it, where somebody else messed up, okay, we give them grace. But if we mess up, we think we deserve it because, we're stupid or something, that's all those are thoughts that have been ingrained in us.
Mm-hmm.
And we can retrain that, but it's hard.
Most definitely. I was told things as a child, that made me lose my confidence in myself. And I'm like you, when somebody said I was stupid, I believed it. So I didn't take criticism very well when I was growing up. I've noticed that now that I've gotten a lot more confidence, that I'm, stepping out of the norm and doing things I normally wouldn't have done before. It's increasing my confidence. So now I welcome somebody to come in and tell me, hey, you can do this better, or you can do that better. There's constructive criticism, and then there's just being mean. But if you give me something that I can work on, then I'm going to do it. I'm welcome to that.
When I grew up, even though I didn't believe certain ways, I had people telling me, because you didn't believe like me, you're going to go to hell. And I would be insecure, and I wonder. Now, if somebody has a different point of view than me, I'm confident enough in myself that I go, okay, that's your point of view, but I still love you, and you have a different, and you might not like me, but I'm going to try to love you. And that's because that's taken years. It's taken years of learning how to realize, to trust myself, to love myself. And it's funny because that was the greatest commandment. Jesus said, love God and then love your neighbor as yourself. But we never focus, at least as Christians, on loving ourselves. We thought somehow loving ourselves was selfish. It was egotistical. Where now I love it when my grandkids have some confidence in themselves, and they're, we would have been said, oh, don't be prideful. And we knock them down. Oh, don't get too cocky. You might have straight A's, but you're not that smart, kid. Well, that doesn't do any good for somebody.
I don't know. Yeah, I kind of got that when I would make straight A's in school, well, you could have made A pluses. Well,
Yeah.
that just shot
Yeah.
down everything that I was feeling so good about myself that, oh man, I accomplished this, to the point where the older I got, the less I cared about it anymore. It's like, I can't live up to that, so why should I care? So my grades suffered. I hit high school and, I was used to making A's and B's, and here I am making C's. And
then also, I was never an A student, okay, so here I am, always a B student. And except for certain areas, I excelled in music and drama. I got A's, but I get a D in algebra. Now, I realize now I wasn't a stupid person with algebra, but my brain just didn't work with mathematics, right?
myself.
I was that's right. So now I realize, and I say to people, intelligence isn't just about IQ. Just because you have a 4.0 doesn't make you an intelligent person. What is intelligent? And now we talk about emotional intelligence. There actually are some people, my wife is a good example. My wife, who was a therapist, and she learned about helping people emotionally. She's so emotionally more balanced and healthier than I was because she worked on her emotional development. Well, there's an emotional intelligence as well in life.
Well, where I live, there's a town close by, and they have a high school. And this high school doesn't just focus on the math and science and English and all that stuff. I mean, they teach it, but they more in line teach kids, say, like, they already know what vocation that they want. So they're teaching them those things, and they're excelling in that. So when they graduate, they can basically go, say, like, they like to work on cars. Boom, they're ready to go work on cars. They want to work on air conditioners. So they're ready to go work on air conditioners, computers, all that kind of stuff. Where my 6-year-old grandson knows more about computers than I do, but I know more about art than he does. I know how to paint and draw and things like that. Okay, so he's intelligent in that part. I'm intelligent in my part. That's what people don't stop to think about. I can get out and I can run just about any piece of equipment you can name. Backhoe is like second nature to me, like riding a bicycle for me. Whereas people that worked under me, they were better at fixing certain things. So they were better at that, and I'm better at what I do. We both had a level of intelligence. We worked together, things got done. People need to think about that.
And it's really true. It's been hard for me to realize, like, my wife is no good in finances and numbers, and I never understood it. And I think, you're just being lazy. You can learn this. But then what I realize is her brain just doesn't work that way. It isn't that she doesn't want to learn it. The same way I am so unmechanical. I will look at a set of blueprints and I can't figure it out. And my daughter will come in and she'll, like, I tried to put together a grill, and after 2 hours, I'm literally like doing nothing. My daughter comes in, and in an hour and a half, she put the grill together, and
It's
in one
crazy,
way
isn't
I
it?
felt, oh, Jerry, you're so stupid. You don't know, and then I just realized, you're not stupid. It's just my brain doesn't work that way.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not saying to give this excuse, somebody just doesn't want to learn in school. Your kids need to go to classes and you need to study. I'm not using it to excuse you, and we can always do our better, but there is a sense of understanding, I guess. Understanding.
Yeah. Well, my wife is better at finances than I am, but I'm also better at gardening than she is. So yeah, it still works out in the long run. We help. You got to learn to rely on each other, help each other, that kind of thing.
And
I
I
think
think, I think a sense of less judgment. I mean, and I certainly think, raising your kids, our kids had to work, our kids had to go to school, and we expected a level of grades. But the same way, when I got a D in algebra, but I got A's in music and that, and then I had a tutor. And I still, even with the tutor, so as long as I was trying my best and I got a D, my parents said, okay, you did your best, right? At least you
Right.
didn't, and there's no teacher who's going to flunk you if you at least, are there and show up and do all the assignments.
Right.
Now, that's the key is, so, I think we just need to have some level and still, keep our work values and work ethics and stuff. But that's why I think, we're so polarized now in our society because we don't want to listen and try to understand somebody else's point of view and maybe how they grew up, what their experience was like. And we feel ourselves being, if somebody has a different point of view than me and they're looked down upon or I'm looked down upon. And we don't need that.
Exactly. Well, and everybody's trying to out victim the next person too. I'm more victimized than you are. And okay, everybody has something that's happened in their past that they can be considered a victim. I mean, I was bullied really bad when I got into high school. It was awful to the point where I never wanted to go to school. I tried committing suicide several times because I played the part of the victim until I finally stood up for myself and said, okay, you know what? I might take a beating, but I'm going to stand up for myself. And they're going to know I'm not going to be a pushover anymore. I stopped being a victim. I think that we need to teach our children, other people around us, stand up for yourself.
I think it's coming to a new understanding about things. I do think it's that a new understanding about mental health and depression.
Right.
And when somebody who's been bullied and how we used to make fun of that. And we used to have stigma about going to counseling or a therapist. I'm not going to go to a shrink. I'm not going to be able to grow in my understanding. Well, now we realize mental health. And look at some of these gymnasts and Simone and people who've dealt with some issues of their life now who are talking about it, and it's healthy. And so I just think as we can come to new understandings, we can hold to my own beliefs of what I believe, but be open to reading, listening to your podcast, your listeners. They're listening to you because you're giving them some things to think about. And that's what I wanted to help people look at is how can we build bridges and turn the walls into tables? How can we find ways of learning to value another person? And how do I hold on to my own beliefs, but also still be open and that I might change?
That's right.
It's okay.
Well, I think of this country like I do a marriage. In a marriage, it's not 50-50. You know that. It's 100-100. Both parties have to put in as much work. If they're not on the same page as far as that goes, then the marriage is not going to work. I knew with my first wife, it was not going to happen. There was no compromise there. Right. With my wife that I have now, she has certain things she likes and I have certain things that I like. She has certain opinions and I have my opinions. We can still compromise, not compromise our beliefs, but we can still come to a compromise and an understanding that what makes this marriage work. That's the way the country should be. Everybody should be putting in 100-100. Listen to each other. Come to a compromise. You don't have to give up your beliefs to come to some kind of a compromise where it's comparable for both parties. You know what I mean?
Well, and having been married for 37 years, and I think marriage is a good example. When we first got married, I was much more, my way is the right way. And, and I was telling my wife, she had been married before. So she went through a divorce, had 2 kids, blended family. And I'm going to make this family, because I grew up in an authoritarian background, and I'm like, it's right. Well, what I realized over the years, there's more than one point of view. there's more than one way to
Mhm.
resolve an issue. If you want to resolve an issue, you can find a way to do it,
That's right.
but I had to learn how to realize my wife's point of view was valued. And I think it's the same way in society. If we think we're the only ones who have the right answer, we're we're never going to find a way of coming together.
That's
And
right.
we can talk about issues and difficult issues, and I have friends. So in my church, we had a conversation about immigration, and I had people who were Republican and Democrats and conservatives, but we found common ground, the things that we all agreed about immigration. Now we had different points of view. Should we build a wall, not a wall? But I say, focus on the things you agree with and move from there.
Hmm.
And I think that's, I just think we need more of that. We can always focus on what divides us, and you can always do that in a marriage, or you can find out the things that we have together and what we can grow together. And a lot of that is having some humility and listening and being willing to work together.
Well, that's the way our friendships go. We have somebody that doesn't necessarily think everything the same way as we do, but you find some kind of common ground that brings you together. That's why you become friends in the first place. Well, I
And
think we're getting away from that.
Well, and I think the Facebook, email, social media, it's so easy to post something on Facebook. And then you just, and you put something nasty or something that you think, and it's kind of disrespectful of other people, and you just slam other people, and then other people read that, or I'll read that from my friend and I'll go, God, why do they even put that up? I mean, if I put something on Facebook, I always try to put something positive, something good, something to benefit. But it's so easy today. You can send an
Mhm.
email and you can be upset about something. And rather than having a conversation in person or on the phone where you can hear each other's voices. And I think that's part of the thing is social media can be very good, but it can also be very toxic. And
Oh
we
yeah.
have to watch how it's used.
Well, it's funny when I first got on Facebook. The only reason why I'd gotten on it because I got an invitation. It was our 10-year high school reunion, I believe, and that's how everybody was connecting through Facebook. Otherwise, I had no interest in social media whatsoever, and I was connecting with people I hadn't seen in those 10 years since graduation, and then people that I hadn't seen in 20, 30 years. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. We had great conversations and, oh, you remember this, you remember that. It was fun times. And now it's gotten to be, it's like a war. That's why I got
Well,
off Twitter. Twitter was just getting ugly. People on there were just being mean to be mean. So I was like, the heck with this. I don't need it.
Well, and I think, social media is like anything. It's wonderful. I've had conversations with people in Singapore, Australia. You're in Texas. I'm in Indiana. So it's wonderful in some way that it can connect us and help us build relationships,
Mm-hmm.
or it can be divisive. So it's all about, what do we want our lives to be about, and what do I want to focus on, and that's what I hope, and that's why I invite people to read my book, because I hope it will be something, the Peacemaker's Path, as a way of finding that journey of our own spiritual journey. And I always say we're spiritual beings on a human journey. We're not human beings on a spiritual journey. And if we acknowledge that we are spiritual beings, that in within us, the divine and God within us, that we can open up, and how do we want to enhance our life and build a life of goodness and flourish. I
Mm-hmm.
think we all want that, but some of us will work harder at it than others, and some of us will get stuck and will play the victim, or just be so stuck in that we don't feel like there's a way out, when there is a way out. But we've got to take a step of courage
Mm-hmm. Everybody wants
your
to talk.
future.
Everybody wants to talk about the problem. Nobody wants to talk about a solution.
Well, and I think that's for our own life. And the solution is hard. To
Oh, yeah.
change is hard. Changing is hard. And sometimes you need somebody who walks with you. That's why I say being in a faith community is helpful, or having some good friends who will help you as I want to grow, that I'm going to take a step of my own journey and exploration. And I think God brings people into our life
Yes.
when we're open to that. If I start praying, God, I want to change my life. I want to become better. I think then you start opening up, and then you realize, oh, all of a sudden I had this conversation. A new person came into my life that gave me this insight, and I can grow because we begin by saying, I'm open, God. I want this in my life.
Exactly. I'm going to make one more statement about social media, and I'm getting off of that. I want to talk more about your books. But, I number one, I have to apologize to some people sometimes, because they'll get on and they'll like my posts and comment and things like that, which is very much appreciated. And I don't do that very often. And I explain to them, I get on there, I post about my videos and that kind of thing, and I don't interact a whole lot on social media. I'm probably on each one of them maybe 5 minutes at the most in a day, because I just want to post, get out of there. I don't want to get into these conversations. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
But I think that's good. I think it's good for people to understand. And I'm the same way. I mean, I love some of your listeners. I mean, so I have a website, jerryzehr.com,
Okay.
and they can connect with me. I love to have conversations with people in a way, in a deeper way, and questions that people have. And that's what I'm about, is I just want to help people who are wanting to improve their life, and how they can do that, and how we can do that together.
Well, I sincerely want to help people, which is why this podcast got started. I used to do nothing but paranormal podcasts, but then I got to meeting wonderful people that had a great message to tell. They had some positivity to bring, and like, you know what? That's the kind of show I would love to have, because there's already enough negativity. Let's do something positive. So I bring people like you on, or people that they have a remarkable story. I had a musician on one time that he talked about how his family came here from Cuba and the sacrifices they made to become Americans, and how much they love it here and they appreciate the freedoms and things. And we take that for granted. We were born here, we have all these freedoms, and it's kind of like that rich kid that gets everything for Christmas and birthdays and always being bought toys and the latest gadgets, doesn't appreciate it after a while. It's just kind of expected. We need to go back to being appreciative. And so we'll get to your books real quick. Now, you do have more than one book, correct?
Well, I have a novel that I wrote called Blurring the Lines, and that was about my time in the entertainment business. And with the theme of it is, what are you willing to sell your soul for? And it's not all true. It's based on my experience, but that would not be that interesting. The character gets involved in some drugs and some dark parts of the entertainment business. And but it began with my own spiritual awakening. When I was out there, that's when I said I found my spirit, even though outwardly people thought I was doing great because I was on stage and getting applause and accolades. Inside, I was empty. My soul was dead. And that's when I was drinking and I was partying and I was doing a lot of that. And I could just see that my life, I'd be dead in 5 years. So that's when I left the entertainment business and began my own kind of spiritual kind of journey about feeding my soul. I mean, I wanted to feel something inside, and the exterior is all here and there, but that was there. So that was what I did. And then, and I, like I say, I'm not really a writer. I've been involved working in peacemaking and building of relationships. And that's finally now why I wrote this book, because we're in a time right now that I feel like there's such a, as we've talked about, disunity and polarization. And I just want people to help, as we've talked about, maybe they'll learn to appreciate a little more about some of the people of other faiths, and also to expand their understanding of God in a new way.
Now, was there an aha moment for you, or was it just a gradual, you just kept thinking about it and decided one day you were going to change?
I think it was a process. I think it was a process of my own journey of reading, of coming to new understandings. I mean, I always, even as a kid, I never believed it when the minister said, "You're going to go to hell." You know, all these people, Native. I mean, I had read some Native American stuff that just was really wonderful, you know, and then so I didn't agree with him, but I didn't know what I believed. And it wasn't really till I went to seminary, till I started studying the scriptures. Then I started studying Jesus' scriptures and seeing what Jesus was really saying about loving your neighbor, about how you care and don't judge. And then as I did that, and then I started traveling. I was in India and Europe, and I started meeting people of other faith traditions. Then it just slowly was, wow, it's exactly what I believe, you know, and then I'd have a new aha and another aha. And so, you know, I'm 66, and it's taken me a journey of many years. So I encourage people, you're on the journey, just be open, and you know, hold to what you do. But if you come with a sense of humility, I think I feel so blessed because my life has been so rich. Somebody says to me, "Well, if you found out there was never a heaven, would you still have been a minister?" And I said, "Yes." And they went, "Really?" I said, "Because it was more about what I do on earth than about the afterlife. You know, I want to experience the abundance of heaven on earth." And that meant loving, forgiving, caring, helping other people. I love what I do. And I do it because I want to care for people. And I've been given back so much more than whatever I've given to others.
Well, I forgot who made the statement, but somebody said one time, even if God wasn't real, he's still necessary. And it's very true.
I think, you know, the question is, what are the set of beliefs? We all have our different set of beliefs, and you're going to frame your life around that. Somebody who sets their beliefs as, you know, we're the only ones, we're the only race, I'm the only religion, and everybody else, you know, we're going to become superior over. Well, how did that feed into the world? Or can you see the value of the diversity of all the people? It's kind of like eating one food and just eating steak, and now you expand your palate. Now you eat vegetables and pizza, and you have all these other foods, and you go, wow, life is so much more rich, right?
Well, look how boring life would be if everything was the same. And then there would be no free will. It's just that you'd be basically, I guess you'd say, a slave to it. Everybody believed the same thing. Everybody did the same thing. Everybody liked the same thing. There's no variety.
Well, and I think what happens whenever it's a major religion or major people, white men, we were in positions of power and dominance in this country for hundreds of years. Now, as other people of other cultures and women, a lot of men got threatened by women coming into leadership roles. And I'd say to my male friends, nobody can take your power away. Okay, you have your own identity, and in fact, we're going to be enhanced better by having women. As you know, I always think if we would have had a woman president someday, we maybe wouldn't be as in many wars as we would have been in the past. But I just think there's value of having people, you know, who are different than us, and that we don't need to be threatened. We can share. We're never going to lose our identity. I'm going to be a white man, and I'll have my place in the world. but let's celebrate that there's a place for all of us.
That's right. Well, my belief has always been, I don't care if you're male, female, if you're this color, that color, whatever. If you are good for that job, you have the know-how, you should get that job, or you should get that position of power. It's whoever's qualified for it.
And I think,
Instead of focusing in just on, oh, well, she's a woman, let's just give it to her. That's not the way to look at it.
yeah, and I think we're at a place now where we can do that. I think early on, there clearly was a glass ceiling.
Of
Women
course.
were paid under, we needed to open up. We needed to do some affirmative action to give people a chance in college and different things. But now I think we are at a place.
Mhm.
And so, we're evolving, but it's okay to say we realize some things in our past we didn't do well in, we did
right.
oppress some people, there was some of those things. And now we can grow. And some people don't even want to talk about that.
Exactly.
And then but we're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting there.
My opinion is if you give somebody something just because of whatever that may be, whether it be gender or the color of your skin, what you're saying to that person is you can't get it on your own merit. You're less than me. I have to give it to you just because, I feel sorry for you. That's the wrong attitude.
Our daughter went to school in West Virginia, and she told me one day, she said, I'm going on food stamps. I went, you are not going on food stamps. Well, everybody goes on food stamps down in West Virginia, And I said, well, you're not going on food stamps. You're getting a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we meant well in the 60s with the welfare system and food stamps. But what it did was it took away the work ethic.
Right.
And I think when you take somebody's work ethic away, you take their self-esteem.
Exactly.
And so now I think for some people who are disabled, senior citizens, I have no problem with those people getting financial help. But somebody who can work needs to work. And that's been the problem is it, like our daughter in West Virginia, in that situation, it was it was other white people who were going on food stamps. It wasn't black people, where everybody has a stereotype, all black people want to be on welfare. No,
not necessarily.
No, it's a system of poverty that people get ingrained in that's generational. And how do you break that generational poverty? And that's hard, that's hard.
Well, this is the sad part. You've got people that are trying, and when they're trying, then it seems like nobody wants to help them. I have a friend of the family. She had 2 children. The baby daddy, whatever you call him, he bolted. So she's taking care of these 2 kids herself. She's a very hard worker. Of course, she was getting assistance because she was working at Walmart. She needed help. I have no problem with that whatsoever. This is what I have a problem with. She worked very hard, and Walmart was seeing that she worked hard, so they gave her a 25-cent an hour raise. Okay, that's not a whole lot of money, but I mean, it's a nice little bit coming in. So what did they do? They took away several $100s worth of her like food stamps because she got that 25-cent an hour raise.
Right.
I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
So you've got somebody that's already struggling, and here they are. They're going to maybe get a little bit ahead. Now you've just pushed them back. Just no wonder people want to stay on government assistance.
Right.
That's the incentive.
Yeah. I agree. It's hard. It's not an easy situation. And the thing is, I haven't been in somebody's shoes, and so I don't know their journey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, and all I can do is do my part, how I can help, and I'll do that the best I can. And let's focus on those things and try to build a way together. Yeah.
That's right. And improve every day. You never stop learning. You can never stop improving. Once you become idle and you think everything is fine, that's basically when you die right there. That's the way I
when
look
you,
at it.
yeah. And when you become kind of closed-minded, where you get angry, and you get angry against society, or you get angry against those people or that group, I say, don't make brushstrokes. It's the same way. Don't say all those liberals or all those conservatives. I have good friends who are Republican, good friends who are Democrats, and we're majority of people are in the middle. And so don't make blanket statements of
That's right.
people, and let's try to find our ways of doing our best together.
That's right.
That's all we can do.
My saying is I'm not prejudiced. Some of my best friends are Houston Texans fans.
That's good. That's good.
All right. So you said you have a website. Can you give us the name of that again?
Sure. It's Jerry Zehr, JerryZehr, jerryzehr.com. And the Peacemakers Path, Multi-Faith Reflections to Deepen Your Spirituality. It's a 40-day devotional, and groups can use it as a study guide because there's 6 themes. And so sometimes a Sunday school group or a Bible study or just some group together can do it each week, and then it has a day for reflection. Or you can do it all together. And I'm on my website. I can do a Zoom meeting with groups if they want to have me come and speak or that. But I want people to enjoy it. I hope it will enhance their life, and share it with somebody else, that we can find ways of making peace in the world.
And what's your social media?
Oh, I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Yeah, you can find me on that. Yeah.
Okay. No, just under Jerry Zehr?
Yeah, just
Okay.
Jerry Zehr.
Well, I think this was a very constructive conversation, and I hope people lasted through the whole thing and they could hear what we're all about. I think that if they knew what we really wanted, they could get on board. At least I hope so.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your work and doing this podcast. And I think you're doing your part like I'm doing my part. And I hope your listeners found this to be helpful to them.
Well, by no means am I perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to fall. So I don't want anybody thinking that I believe that I know all the answers, because I don't. That's why I have some of the guests I have on. Sometimes people can influence the way I think, and sometimes I'm hard-headed. But I think this was a really good conversation. I think we got the message out. Hey, this is the way we think. We care about people, and that's what I want you to take from this, is that we care about
Great.
you. And
Thank
so,
you. Yes, I think God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Well, with that in mind, I want to thank everybody that joins us, that watches us and listens. We need your support. So if you could, please hit that subscribe button, share this, like it, comment. If you like what you hear, tell me. If you didn't like something, tell me. You think I could change something? I am open to suggestions. I just want to know that we appreciate you. We'll catch you on the next one. And until then, peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network